think I'm gonna just, I will sit here, but I'll start there. I just stand to say a couple things about the ACAP program.
You can leave it on the whole duration if you want, unless you know you're fidgeting.
So is this already on then?
Absolutely.
Yeah, to share, yeah. I'll get the, let's get the retweet and stuff. Yeah. We'll get some pictures from, okay, that sounds great. Okay, we're good to go. Are you guys ready? Okay, let's go ahead. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank the Hinckley Institute for hosting this forum on careers that change the world. I'm Professor Stephen Lobel. I'm a professor in the Department of Political Science. It's nice to see a couple of my students here. I teach international relations, international security, and it's really a pleasure for me to introduce both Gray Baird and Ivy Estabrook. Both these people have been really supportive. We received a Minerva Research Initiative Award from the DoD, and Ivy was held a great consult in terms of getting that award, and we've presented our findings to Gray and to the Conflict and Stabilization Operations Bureau. There's really two objectives I want to take care of, cover for today. Will moderate a discussion on jobs and careers in the international sector, and with a focus on the State Department and the Department of Defense, but also in the private sector too. And this will be a chance for you to ask some questions. We'll have a discussion, and then I'll leave some time for a Q&A. And then I also want to introduce a very exciting new initiative that's been brought to our attention that the University of Utah has been invited to participate in. It's called the Academic Centers of Conflict Anticipation and Prevention. And we started a new scholars research experience associated with this ACAP program, and there's going to be a lot of acronyms, so this could be your first introduction into government today. So this ACAP program, I want to also talk about this new initiative and opportunities for students both here and who are online to apply. So I'll talk about that briefly also. So let me take a couple minutes and introduce our two foreign policy experts, and again, experts in both in terms of public and the private sector. And let me start with Gray Barrett. Gray's actually going to be in town for basically this year. He will be a great resource for us, hopefully, and we'll be able to invite him in a couple times. Gray's the lead for the Analyst Data Access and Prediction Team, or ADAPT, and in the Advanced Analytics Office in the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, so CSO. And CSO is, in fact, who's supporting this ACAP program. I told you lots of acronyms here. Gray focuses on using data and statistical methods to provide early warning and monitoring of atrocities, fragility, and instability. One thing you're going to see across both Gray and Ivy's background is this statistical methods background. So perhaps something that's a cue for you guys also, what's perhaps important for you to study. Also, Gray has a BA in political science and international studies. How many are poli-sci here? A couple. How many are international studies? So this is exactly what Gray's background is also. He has an MA in political science from Emory University. Gray had an opportunity as a Fulbright scholar to be at the University of Oslo and at the Public Research Institute of Oslo, or PRIO, which are really fun places. I was also able to, I spent time in Oslo too, and it was a great opportunity. Ivy Estabrook is a senior innovative policy strategist at RTI International. Ivy has spent her career developing and launching emerging technologies. By training, she has a really interesting background in cognitive neuroscientists. She has an expertise in psycholinguistics, pharmacological interventions, and statistical modeling, and she's going to have to tell us more about these. These sound really exciting. Again, though, the statistical modeling, so this should be a cue, perhaps a blinking lights of what's important for you to study, and I'm going to give them both an opportunity to talk about this. Ivy provides strategic support to federal clients that are advancing the competitiveness of the U.S. She has a BA in biological sciences, an MS in national security and strategy and resource management, and a PhD in neuroscience. I want to take a couple minutes before I start a discussion about careers in the public and private sector. I want to introduce this ACAP program, this Academic Centers of Conflict Anticipation and Prevention. And Gray can also talk about this also, because it's his bureau that's advancing this really new, exciting initiative. The University of Utah was invited to participate in this as one of 6 initial schools. So this is getting in on the ground level opportunity in this ACAP program. I'm not paying attention here, am I? The intent of this ACAP program is to establish a diverse national cadre of academic institutions and experts to supplement and expand the Bureau's ability to anticipate and prevent conflict. The key words in here are to supplement and expand. That's the opportunity of pulling in undergraduate students, especially undergraduates who have immersive experiences overseas. This is particularly what they're interested in attracting. This ACAP program, we've decided to run with at the University of Utah and create a research scholars experience. So an ACAP scholars research experience, and students will undertake projects that CSO has identified as important. So people like Gray, CSO officers will provide a menu of prompts, and these prompts will be what the students will do a deep dive in. It could be for an honors paper, it could be for a deep research paper, it could be for a capstone paper. So students who are engaged in a deep research paper would write on one of these prompts. ACAP scholars will learn about data collection and data use, which is, again, something, as you see from their backgrounds, is incredibly important. They're going to help build CSO's data set through your research. Students will meet and engage CSO officers, staffers, and planners through Teams or Zoom with CSO, perhaps even an in-brief DC briefing with CSO officers. So again, this is an incredible opportunity for you actually to meet policy planners. And it's also a chance really for you to gain awareness of job opportunities, both in CSO and in broader in DC. Again, opportunities in data or policy analysis, which both of them will also talk about and have backgrounds. In terms of kind of the nuts and bolts of this program, the ACAP program, this ACAP Scholars Research Experience, we've set this up as a 5,000 level course in poli-sci. This will be hopefully offered this spring is our intent. And we're looking for about 10, maybe up to even 20 students. Students who are juniors and seniors will apply once a year in the fall for the spring semester. If this is something that you're interested in, you should email me. My email is posted on here. Send me an email, send me your name, send me your major, if you have a minor also. Send me a couple sentences about your interest and expertise, if you haven't had an immersive international experience, if you have foreign language or other skills. So send that to me so as we start to put together a list. Yeah, that's a great idea. You can take a picture of the slide if you want also. I'm also in poli-sci on the second floor. I'm easy to find. So this is the kind of information we're looking for. So again, as your student research papers will contribute directly to CSO's database and on key conflicts. And through CSO's tools and data, you'll be able to advance your capstone, your thesis, your research papers. Ray, anything you want to add? I guess I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of insight to some of these prompts. I've yet to see them, and I know they're still working on that. Any sense? Can you give us a sense of what some of these prompts might look like?
Yeah, sure. And maybe I'll touch on the program fairly broadly.
Yeah.
So this ACAP program, brand new, was modeled off of something called ICA, wherein different universities, colleges partner with the intelligence community. Apply the time and resources and brain power that y'all have to questions that are of relevance and that community. So we're kind of transposing that to work for the State Department. And what that means is you'll be working on issues that are of public policy relevance. So the State Department is the premier foreign policy decision-making institution in the United States, right? So anything from agreements to stopping conflicts, to figuring out which elections we need to work to make safer or more democratic. My bureau works on conflict issues, so that'll be kind of the main thrust of these prompts. So we've got everything from which elections are coming up in the next 12 to 18 months are most at risk of electoral violence. Where might we deploy electoral monitors to help mitigate the risk? Based on previous trajectories of violence, what can we expect? What is the political landscape? We work all around the world, so I know we've got a big kind of gap with respect to our coverage in some areas. Our office is pretty small, so I think we'll be leaning in on your geographic expertise or interest, as Stephen mentioned during this slide here. So bring language skills if you're going to travel, that'll be of use. And then we've got, we also work on data and analytics. So we've got access to a number of conflict data sets. We financially support a number, and sometimes the limiting factor in government, at least in my experience, is time. So if you have the time, the resources, the brain power, and you can help us figure out, okay, this is how these data sets fit together. This is how it applies to your policy setting or an upcoming decision or a summit. Then I think those opportunities will come to fruition as well. I'm really excited about this opportunity. CSO, my bureau's got a lot of thank you. Got a lot of ideas already, and then we will be the kind of trajectory of this is to also work with other bureaus in the department, right? So we've got a bureau for diplomatic security. They make sure our embassies and posts and missions overseas are safe. We're interested in where do we need to evacuate folks? What places are at risk of climate change-induced risks? So you can just see if you take this, if you move a link or two further along the chain, there's an endless wealth of questions that we don't necessarily have the resources to investigate, and that's why we set up ACAP, and we're investing in y'all and looking forward to this partnership.
Excellent, thank you. I want to take about 25 minutes or so, engage in a discussion with Ivy and Gray about their jobs and careers. I want to give each of you a couple minutes to just tell us a little bit about your careers. Ivy, you want to tell us a little bit about your career in the both public and private sector?
Sure. It's nice to be here and nice to meet all of you. Thanks for the kind introduction. We've covered my bizarre academic background. I've worked, as Stephen said, both in public and private sector. I started my career post PhD at the Office of Naval Research, which is the primary funding agency for science and technology work that supports both the Navy and the Marine Corps. My program was focused on social and computational sciences. So I funded other people. I didn't do any of the work. I funded academics and companies to do things like build decision tools. We had actually a large program that looked at political instability. We were able to use natural language processing combined with some political science models to provide forecasts of 5 types of political instability at the country level 6 months in advance that fed analysts across the government to help understand what the context was, where we might be sending Marines next, and where we needed to think about future instability that the US might respond to or might not respond to, depending on the country. Following that, I was recruited out to the state of Utah and ran the state's tech-based economic development agency, so have some experience at the state level too. On the international angle of that, participated in a large number of trade missions, really trying to build that bridge between early stage companies here in Utah and other markets, as well as academic partnerships between our universities here and those in other countries. Following that, I was at 2 different biotech startups here in Utah, some international threads there as well that happy to talk about. Currently, I provide consulting advice, strategy advice to several federal agencies on a number of different types of programs. So, stop there.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your background also.
Sure, happy to, and thanks so much to you, Stephen, and to the Hinckley Institute for hosting this discussion today, and to Ivy as well. I'm happy to be here beside you.
These are State Department skills. He gave all the nice thank yous, DoDs. I just told you earlier.
So, as Stephen said, I got my bachelor's in political science and international studies from the University of North Carolina at Asheville. I'm from East Tennessee originally. I spent a lot of my time in the Southeast. After that experience, so during my undergrad, I worked very closely with the political science department on a number of projects related to human rights violations and state repression, one of which is called the Political Terror Scale, which I'd encourage you to look up. And I have continued my affiliation with them to this day. So that is to say, if you have research ties that you develop early or in your college career, such as through ACAP maybe, they can take you places. So I completed my undergrad and then had the opportunity to do a Fulbright research scholarship at the University of Oslo. I studied international human rights law and worked at the Peace Research Institute, or PRIO, which is basically the premier European think tank relating to conflict, political violence, insecurity, peace. And then had the chance to work on a UN World Bank report that fed into basically an assessment of how we can succeed with the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 16 is about reducing conflict and instability worldwide. After that, I started my PhD in political science at Emory University. As you'll note from Stephen's bio that he read, I do not have a PhD. I've been interested in federal service for a long time, had applied unsuccessfully to intern at state twice while in undergrad, was afforded an opportunity to intern at the State Department summer of my first year of grad school, and that's all she wrote. I worked for the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, Office of Advanced Analytics, which is where I currently work. Had a wonderful time during that internship, and basically was tuned into opportunities to come back. So I did what's called mastering out. I completed all the coursework, which was quantitatively focused political science, and then started as a contractor. Did that for 2 years for the State Department, and then have become a civil servant, i.e. a direct employee of the federal government about a little over 2 years ago. And what I do now is I'm the lead for the Analysis, Data Access, and Prediction team, or ADAPT, in the Office of Advanced Analytics. Our office is kind of a weird body within the State Department and probably federal government more broadly, but we've got about 20 folks, master's, PhD level people who trained in quantitative methods. So social science, mathematics, geography, stats, engineering, you name it. And what we do is we apply those skills to foreign policy questions. So where are atrocities likely to happen in the next 12 months? how might we rank and prioritize countries where we can provide foreign assistance, and where specifically in those countries would that be most effective? And as you can probably guess, this is not a language that's necessarily, that has not achieved a great deal of fluency in the department. So we're also working to improve the general data literacy in the State Department, which is an institution that relies on institutional knowledge and what are called cables, which are written qualitative reports assessing the situation about political issues or economic issues that are sent all around the world. So within that, my office or my team deals with kind of global and thematic issues, atrocity prevention, climate fragility, women, peace, and security, and then we also work on investing in multilateral and multi-donor instruments to basically support data sets that we all use. So that's kind of the high-level overview.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. I want to step back a little bit. So how many of you who's undergraduates here? Any graduate students? I want to step back and think a little bit back to your undergraduate days, and I want you to give us a sense of what you studied in undergraduate. I'm also interested in, what did you do right and what did you do wrong, kind of looking back in terms of where you are now. So give us a sense of your undergraduate, and then I want to do the same thing. I want to talk about your decision to get master's degrees also, but focusing on undergraduate degree, which a number of people here are also. Tell us a little bit about what you studied and what you thought, what you did right and wrong, kind of looking back at that stage of your career. Yeah, Ivy, go ahead.
I studied biology undergrad, so a little bit different. But I think so I was always interested in political science, but biology and neuroscience kind of pulled me into that world. A couple of the things that I think I did right, I did a lot of internships. I took all the opportunities I had to go do work at other institutions. So I went to Smith, which is a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, women's college. But I spent my summers at the University of Washington in Seattle and at Georgetown, 2 of my summers doing academic work there. And I think that was one of the best things I did, was to get other perspectives on what the world looks like, what the opportunities are. In particular, being in DC, and I will say this, especially as political or scientists and international relations folks, having a stint in DC at some time in your career is just really powerful in understanding how things actually work, where the rubber meets the road. And even though I was doing epilepsy research, I still got insights into advocacy, how the medical system works from a policy perspective, because I was present in that world. The other thing I did right was I didn't go straight to grad school. I took a couple of years and worked in a research lab to try to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, which clearly from my career, I haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up. But I think that was is a good thing too. And I would just stress following what interests you and finding unique opportunities to try things out, I think is a really, can be really fruitful. And I'm always surprised at the lessons I learned in different parts of my career or my education pull through in ways that I didn't anticipate originally.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? These skills you learn that you don't realize you will use later on. I think the advice also about not rushing to graduate school, getting that work experience is really important. Gray, same question.
Yeah, so I would back you up on both of those points.
Yep.
Going to DC, or several of those points, going to DC, interning. I wish I'd taken some more time before or between undergrad and grad school. One thing I did right was I came into college as a pre-med major, and then I sat through my first day of chemistry class, got up, and then I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I don't want to do this anymore." I said, I'm not good at chemistry, I'm not going to succeed, and I need to do a hard pivot and do something else. And I had an interest in politics, political science, international relations, so I switched to an intro IR class and never really looked back. So I think with a lot of this, it's not, I feel like sometimes you listen to panels, and particularly in DC, and like everybody, they paint their life picture as if it's linear. It's like, well, this logically proceeded to do this, and then, but it's not necessarily the way it works. And so sometimes, and my wife says this a lot, but it's about doing the next right step. And so for me, the next right step was to get the heck out of that class and do something very, very different that I was interested in and that would carry me through. So that's something I did right. And then, the other thing I did wrong was I didn't take more time between undergrad and grad school. And I think when you get to this point in your lives and your careers, like the thing you know how to do well is school, right? You're kind of path dependent. Like I've done school my whole life, got it, cool. College, great. It's very tempting to see like, oh, grad school, another 2 years or another 5, 6, 7. If you look into PhD programs, that's figured out. Check the box, cool. Let's coast. But I think by the time you get into those programs and the really kind of tough aspects of the grad school programs, you're gonna wish that you'd had a little more time to figure out why you're here, what skills are you trying to build, and like what's going to carry you through the tough times.
Excellent. I'm wondering if both of you can just say a little bit about the decision to get a master's degree, especially in the context of the public or private sector. Was there a push to get the master's degree? Was it necessary? Was it necessary to make the next jump? And then Ivy, also your decision to go further on and get the PhD also. Ivy? Yeah.
Okay, so I did it a little backwards, to be
Uh-huh.
honest. I did the PhD first, and then I did a master's.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so my PhD is in neuroscience. I thought I wanted to be an academic. I thought that was what I was going to do, and I got halfway through my PhD, and actually went to the Career Center, sort of in tears, like this is not what I thought it was going to be. They did a bunch of personality tests and told me I should quit and go to law school, which at that point I was too far in. But what I did do was kind of pivot. So I was at Georgetown, obviously DC, very accessible. So in addition to trying to get my PhD completed as quickly as possible, I started taking advantage of the community. So I did an internship on Capitol Hill. I worked in a senator's office doing health policy work. That kind of opened my aperture a little bit of these are other ways I could use my background for public policy. And then I ended up, when I finished my PhD, I did a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, which is a 1 to 2 year stint in a federal agency. And I ended up, I started in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, had a crazy experience, which is, probably better as a sidebar than who knows who's watching. And then ended up working for the Office of Naval Research's International Office, where we did technology scouting. And so did that for a couple of years. My master's, which is the point of this discussion, I actually went to one of the professional military schools for a master's degree. So this was considered professional development for me, leadership development. My boss at the Navy had gone to this program. It's 1 year. It was about 80% senior military officers. There were folks from State Department as well, other federal agencies, and it really was a leadership training opportunity for me. We had senior executives from across the government and from industry came in and spoke to us off the record. So I'm going to date myself. President Obama came in and spoke to us off the record. We had 2 secretaries of defense because he went through a lot of secretaries of defense, came and spoke off the record. General Petraeus was the head of the CIA. He came in like 3 days before his affair was announced. So we had one of the last discussions with him. But it was it was a little serendipitous because it was professional development, but it was one of the best learning years of my 26 years of school. So hopefully that's enough.
Gray also, and I guess I'm one of the kind of questions I'm also interested in is both of you have this similar background with methods and statistical methods in particular. Is you're advising students? Is there very specific coursework you would recommend, especially at the undergraduate level? I guess I'll let you take a swing at that, and then I'll come back to Gray.
So I think quantitative skills are becoming more and more important. So I would stress that being proficient and very comfortable with working with large data sets, working with quantitative data. The other thing I would highlight, which I'm not sure how this maps exactly to a specific course, is the ability to really think critically about problems and then back out what is the data I need to understand what the right recommendation is going to be, whether it's a policy issue, an economic issue. Having that skill set, that's where I see a huge gap in folks that I work with, is you can understand how to run a spreadsheet and code and Python, which I do not know how to do. But being able to translate, what does the data mean for a policymaker, or what is the analysis that's meaningful, is really the bridge that I think having that skill set and being able to show how you've done it is what will put you ahead.
Excellent. Great, same question. In particular, your decision to get a master's, and also if there's really kind of very specific coursework, especially at the undergraduate level, you encourage students to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, I would agree totally with what Ivy just indicated. Another thing I could have added to my undergrad regrets list is not taking more quant courses, not learning how to code in R or Stata or Python. Or C. Because, and you're seeing this very, very slowly kind of trickle through, like the State Department is like, there's definitely a hunger for people who know how to use quantitative analysis and data, but sometimes they're not sure like what flavor it can take. So we're at a really interesting point in the development where everybody wants data, they want to use it, but if you don't have if you haven't developed the requisite skills to convey that information in a pithy way that highlights for your principal or your decision maker, like all these numbers aside, like what's the decision? Like that's the powerful combo. So for me, it's quant skills, statistics, econometrics, as much as you can, coding, and even there's some great resources online to teach yourself a lot of this. And then that's an interesting thing, is there are a lot of people in the sector who are self-taught. But if you have those hard skills, then you can go really far. And then I'd say if you compare that with critical thinking, and I would say also a good writing ability, like being able to have very, very, very tight, succinct writing that is very punchy. And then also, and one more thing is being able to kind of think strategically at the highest level. And this goes along with Ivy's point too, but it's like, why are we running these models? Like, why is this important? Normatively, objectively, like, why are we doing any of this analysis? Like, what is the ultimate goal? And then you can back out how you need to get there, but also you can articulate to people who are much higher up the chain, who view things at a 30,000 foot level, that, what your strategic outcome is and your strategic goal.
Excellent, thank you. Really, some really good advice you guys are getting from years of experience. Let me ask you, I'm a little curious about how you got your first jobs, and I'm also curious, especially at the entry level, what it's like. What's day-to-day really like at DoD or State Department? Give us kind of a feel of what these jobs are like, but also I'm curious kind of the nuts and bolts about how'd you get your first job in the government? Ivy, you want to start us off? Yeah.
So I got my first government job through my fellowship. I cannot emphasize enough how much of an opportunity it is to do an internship or a fellowship. There are a lot of, the State Department I know has them, DoD has them. Sometimes it can be a little hard to navigate, and I won't speak for Gray. I'm totally willing to help folks figure out that process. There are also kind of independent organizations that run fellowship programs on the Hill, as well as in the executive branch agencies. One, it gives you an understanding of how things really work, and is this something I would like to do, or do I hate this? Because people hate it. I mean, I love it. I loved it, loved my experience, but other people did not. And also it allows others to get to know you. And I think that's really important, to build your relationships in those agencies, because government hiring is not for the faint of heart. But if you build those relationships in an office once, there are ways to figure out how to get you in as a civil servant.
I would agree with that advice completely. I mean, so I interned at the State Department in summer. I talked to my boss at the end, and I was like, look, I love this job. I want to come back. How can we make it happen? He's like, well, keep an eye out. Here's, we hire through these 3 contractors. Keep an eye out. But throughout the summer, I had informal coffees with like 50 people or something, which sounds excessive, and it probably was, but nobody turned me down. I would shoot them an email and say, do you have 20 minutes to grab a coffee and just chat about your career. And like you mentioned, like illustrating or highlighting like the various crazy paths people have to get into the federal government, it's super, super helpful. Some were interns, some were AAAS fellows, some were contractors, came in through these mechanisms that you would never ever hear of. And then, you know, there are lots of ways to do it, but that's how I got my first job, is networking, in a word, but making those connections, getting my feet wet in the institution to know that's what I wanted to do, and then, you know, people would know that I was good stuff, or at least good enough to, you know, be given a shot.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's great advice. And obviously, Hinckley Institute of Politics does internships too. And who's done an internship in DC already? Okay. So, and then we have two fabulous resources here also, who are both willing to interact with you, as well as Hinckley Institute. So tell us, Gray, I'll start with you. Tell us, what's day-to-day like in the State Department? Give us a sense without scaring them off.
The caveat in there. So right now, okay, so I'll give you maybe a quick overview of what I'm doing like today. So next week is something called the UN General Assembly High Level Week. So this is where all the countries in the world and heads of state and secretaries of state and equivalents come to New York and then talk about global issues. So I'm going up to New York next week to basically man my assistant secretary, who's like the lowest level presidential appointed official, Senate confirmed official. And we're gonna talk about these data projects and data investments we've been making. So it's everything from writing her talking points, doing something called clearance, which is sending it around to other parts of the department or interagency to make sure they're okay with what she's gonna say. Setting up side meetings, bilateral meetings, you know, putting together objectives and agendas. This is where it's really helpful to be able to articulate, like, what the heck are we doing here? What's the strategic level outcome? If I have like literally 7 minutes between my principal getting coffee and lunch or whatever. And then I'm also managing a team. So I've got 9 people on my team, and they're covering various aspects of things. So we're creating a new atrocity prevention strategy for our bureau, revamping our statistical model, figuring out how to feed that into National Security Council processes. I've got a team that's preparing a workshop related to climate fragility issues at the U.S. Institute of Peace in a couple months. We're working on a conflict forecasting competition that we have entered. Yeah, and then aside from that, I'm working on our conflict observatory program, which is documenting Russian atrocities in Ukraine and also crimes against humanity or potential crimes against humanity in Sudan. So it's a lot of fun. It's really stressful, but it's being inside the arena, so to speak, I mean, it's an opportunity that I hope everyone gets to have. It's really humbling, and I'm very lucky to have it.
Ivy, you want to tell us about day-to-day in DoD and ONR?
Yeah. So I had a great job. I'll just say I really loved my job. I got to sit at the intersection of the boots on the ground, right, the guys that were and gals that were going downrange. I was there at the height of the Afghan surge and the Iraq surge, and so got to work with them. Like, often when Marines would come back, I would get to go to their after action reviews and ask them what was hard, what were your challenges, and then back translate those challenges into, were there scientific or technical solutions that we could fund the development of that would close the loop on this problem for the next set of people who went downrange. So it felt very impactful to something that was very significant in my life and what was going on for the country at the time. And then I got to talk to scientists, which as a scientist, I really enjoyed. So working with academics and industry scientists to say, okay, here's the challenge set. Who has ideas to bring to this? What can we do both from an academic standpoint to really understand what the challenges are here? So a lot of the work was on understanding, so as an example, understanding the incentive structures within Afghan tribes, right? How do you determine who's in charge and who's really making decisions? And then how do you build that into a tool that a Marine, either a mental model or an actual tool, so a Marine can implement that when they're going into the field. And then the other piece I got to do quite a bit of was working with senior policymakers. So what did this work mean for the larger strategic view of what the Department of Defense was doing or what a specific service was doing. So really sitting at that intersection, every day was different. I could be on site at a university working with one of the teams I was funding. I could be in the Pentagon in my suit, of which I had exactly 5, one for every day of the week, briefing senior leaders on what we were doing and the impact it was having and the impact it could have on what they cared about across the board, a lot of different topics.
Yeah. So Ivy, 2 questions. So, how about your decision to leave the
Why
public
did I
sector?
leave?
Yeah, why'd you leave? Why'd you go to the private sector?
So again, I will date myself. Sequestration started, which, if you don't know sequestration, this was a deal the Democrats and Republicans made over spending bill that was so bad for both sides, it would never happen. And then it happened. So I was a civil servant. I was furloughed 1 day a week. I was like, that's 20% of my income that I did not get back, unlike all these closures, which made one of the beauties of government service being stable, not stable. I'd also been in the role I was in for 8 years and felt like I'd learned what I was going to learn, and had contributed what I felt I had to contribute, and I was ready for a new set of challenges.
Excellent.
I anticipate at another point in my career, I will end up back in government. I also will say part of going to the private sector is everyone who works in government has always been told how much better the private sector is. They're more efficient, they get stuff done, the people are better. That is not true, I will say. There's a mixed bag everywhere, but some of the people I worked with in government were just excellent. Some of the smartest, hardest working folks. There are good people in industry too, but don't get scared away from that sort of stereotype of a government worker. It's definitely not a 9-to-5 job. I think I can say for both of us.
Let me also ask you, Ivy, about the decision to get the master's degree. Is this something that our undergraduates will have to consider at some point in terms of making a jump or a leap? Is this something they have to be thinking about too?
So I think you don't have to, and as I think about the folks that I worked with, there are a handful who didn't. I do think it's becoming more and more sort of a minimum entry requirement to some jobs, but it's really depends on what other skill sets you have in your pocket and what a master's would add. I will say I think not doing it immediately is a good idea in general, but also you're going to learn things in whatever your first job is that will open up where your gaps are and where your curiosity is. And I think often pursuing a master's allows you to kind of explore more where you might want to go now that you have a little like rubber meets the road experience. I'll also say, at least when I was in the federal government, there was some level of tuition reimbursement at most federal agencies that would help defer some of the costs of a master's. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Excellent. And I think one lesson hopefully you're taking from this is that these experiences also help you know what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. And like Ray, I too took chemistry and engineering calculus, and I decided I now knew I didn't want to do that. So that's an important also. Let me ask one last question, then I'll turn this over to you guys to ask some questions. I'm wondering, how's the job market changing? What do you see as the market changing? And especially since kind of your early experience and now, and perhaps in terms of skill sets, in terms of what students need to have, in terms of the kind of jobs that exist now. Yeah, Ivy, go ahead.
I'm happy to jump in on that because
Yeah.
I do a fair bit of hiring, both for sort of fresh out of undergrad and then also folks who have some graduate school, whether it's a master's or a PhD under their belt. I will tell you soft skills. I feel like I can teach pretty much anyone how to, well, I can't teach them to code. We've already established that. But there are other people who can teach you how to code. But the soft skills, the critical thinking skills are key, and writing. I cannot overemphasize concise writing with a clear thesis statement and then backing it up. And especially if you can integrate data in, I require a writing sample from anyone I hire, whether it's a writing intensive job or not, because it's so critical for communication. So that's what I think sharpening your critical thinking skills and having the ability to write well are critical.
Great.
Yeah, and, yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, the writing thing is super important. The other thing I think we're all collectively grappling with is like, what does work look like in the post-pandemic kind of environment? Federal government's figuring it out, yeah, to a large extent. Can we telework? Do we hybrid work? So I think being able to demonstrate, because y'all have lived through this at a different point of your lives than we have, but being able to demonstrate how you navigated that, how you went to classes, did you do an internship, did you work, and being able to articulate how you can navigate this kind of question that we're all still grappling with and don't really have a good answer to, I think is really helpful. Yeah, particularly as like I'm a manager, and I had to onboard people who I never saw for 2 years, but I trusted that they would be able to work independently, do a high quality of work, and so being able to articulate that and write well, and then have some of those hard skills, I think that's hard to beat.
Excellent. So I'm going to open this up. If you want to raise your hand, I'll pass the microphone around. Introduce yourself, and you can ask a question to either Gray or Ivy, or to both of them. Who's got the first question? This is your chance to ask people who have experience in the State Department, in the Defense Department, in the private sector. These are the kind of, you came here to learn about these jobs. What questions do you have? I was going to say, have I done such a good job of asking questions that there's no questions out there?
Threatened to sing. And that would raise some
Introduce
questions.
yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ella. I'm a junior studying economics and political science. It's funny that you mentioned kind of taking a gap to work before going straight to grad school, because I had a conversation with someone yesterday where I was like, I'm doubting whether or not I should go to grad school right out of the gate. But do you think that, not having that graduate experience, does it impact your ability to get these like higher level state jobs right out the gate, or are there still opportunities to kind of be integrated into those departments?
Yeah, maybe just like 30-second overview of how this might work at state. So there's something called the general schedule, or GS scale, which is how it determines your pay, and is also tied to a level of qualifications and experience. So for example, if you have a bachelor's degree, you're fresh out of the school, you start at a GS 7 automatically. With a master's, start at GS 9 automatically, this is with no experience, and PhD GS 11. As you go through and spend more time in the government, you can work up. After 1 year in service at a grade, you're eligible to apply to the next one up. So you can imagine that once you get your foot in the door, the thing that matters is time in service. But I would say if you have a master's, you can skip a couple rungs up the ladder and then do a much more kind of broad and, I wouldn't say interesting, but a different set of work. More technical, more applied, more policy facing potentially. So that's one thing to consider. But I would still say, like, if you have the chance to even just take a year, figure it out, what you want to do, before you kind of get into grad school, I don't think it's a year wasted. I think quite the opposite.
So I think it depends what your interests are and where you want to go. So if and I did my working on the Hill as a fellow when I was finishing my PhD. That taught me I did not want to work on the Hill. Right? That was a great experience. I learned a ton, and I've actually used it repeatedly in other jobs when I've had to do Hill work. Everybody there is fresh out of college, right? So that's a place where it doesn't matter if you have a master's or not. I think different agencies have different needs, and I would say look at those the less well-known agencies too, right? Like there's a trade and development agency that's tiny, but they do really interesting work. There may be some opportunities. I'd also say going straight into government service isn't the only way to work with the government. So like my organization, the organization I work for now is a large nonprofit, but we do advising to the government. Currently all my clients are federal government agencies, coming to work at a nonprofit that has that interface will also give you a sense of what the work is like. I wouldn't hold back. The GS scale is a little depressing. But other ways to work within the government halls is as a contractor, and that I think often there are opportunities that don't require a master's.
Excellent, thanks. Whom else? Yeah.
So, I've applied for an internship with State before. I almost got to the interview phase. I would like to know, once I get there, what do I need to know? What do I need to keep in mind? What are they looking for? What is my competition able to provide that might be better than what I can provide? I'd like to know, and for the DoD as well, for internships specifically, what are they looking for? How can I set myself apart from everybody else who's applying? And another thing too, how heavily weighted is being from a different country, speaking a different language, and how does that factor into the candidacy, so on and so forth. Yeah.
These are great questions. These are the great questions. If you have these type of questions, this is an excellent opportunity to ask them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say one kind of prefacing remark is that, so last fall, I believe the State Department started paying interns, which was fantastic, great move, but also heavily reduced the number of interns that we hire. So now we pay all the interns versus having unpaid versus paid. And there's also the U.S. Foreign Service internship program, U.S. FSIP, which is not in the traditional summer, fall, spring internship cohort. So I'd encourage you to check that out. It's a 2-year program. Your first year is in DC, or your first summer is in DC. Your second summer is at an embassy or post. We had a U.S. FSIP intern who was a rising sophomore work with us, and she was dynamite. So that's, just add that to your list of things to look up. I'd say a couple things. The first is that being at the University of Utah it actually helps, because we get a ton of applicants from the DC, Maryland, Virginia, DMV area, Georgetown, GW, all those schools. So being from outside that area and from the Mountain West, that is an advantage, as is speaking another language, having a different cultural background. I think those are huge boons. And I would say to you, the things that would be helpful for you to kind of clearly articulate is why State? Why do you want to work there? What have you been studying that really fires you up about international politics or international relations? Why do you find that interesting? And also, how will you carry that forward in your career? Do you want to work in public service, or is this just this is a box I think I should check. I want to network and then figure it out, or is it I want to be in public service, capital P, capital S, in some form or flavor, and I'm figuring it out. This makes sense given my interests. I've got demonstrated research or demonstrated work in this area, and then the background to prove it. And I think it's ambitious when folks from outside the DMV who interact with the State Department or federal government all the time, when they apply and wholesale move out to DC. I think that takes some chutzpah. So yeah, I would really drive that home and have a really punchy application.
I'd also just say, don't be deterred by not getting selected the first time, because it's a numbers game and you never know why or why not, but keeping at it is important. Just DoD has a number. We don't have this problem of, not everybody wants to go to DoD. The way State Department seems very romantic. But DoD can be equally romantic. So there are a number of fellowship programs, specific languages. There are, and I can look it up and send it to you if you want. There are folks with fluency or learning specific languages that are a deficiency. They'll cover tuition. That's part of the internship, is you spend time in DoD in the summers and then your tuition is covered. So there are a lot, and if you're at all technical, which I know this group is more political science, there are tons of STEM opportunities too. So if your friends are in STEM, let me know.
Good. What else? I saw some other hands. Yeah. Go ahead and introduce yourself also.
Hi, Hi, I'm Samantha, and I'm a freshman in international studies. And so, as an international studies major, I have to study abroad. But I've also been thinking of the option of working with the military specifically. Do you think either of those options would help launch me into a career in politics, and which one would be more helpful?
Or the military, what does that mean to you?
I don't know, more of administration. My mom's in administration with the Army currently, so just kind of that and government work,
Okay.
I guess.
More on the civilian side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can never predict where anything is going to take you or what the boxes are that you end up needing to check to get somewhere. I think there's real positives of having an overseas experience. I consider coming to Utah a little bit of my expat experience, but you never. I don't know anybody who's regretted going and immersing in another culture and having that experience. DoD will be here forever, is what I would say.
I spent 2 years abroad in high school, and then the Fulbright, and then studied abroad as well in college, and I don't regret that at all. If you can, I would do someplace where English is not the first language or it's not commonly spoken. It'll really push you and kind of shape your character in a way that it's hard to replicate.
Excellent. Other questions? Any other questions? Let me go ahead. Oh, there we go.
So, going back to the degree of impact that being from a different country can have on your application, I know from FSOs I've spoken to that it can be difficult to be from a different country just because of, I guess there's some degree of concern there in terms of like with which country you're sticking and that might matter in the application process. Is this true?
Citizen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's like the first cut. I think it depends. I also think. Oh, okay. I think a lot of things are changing. Like even when I was at DoD, you couldn't be a dual citizen. So if you had birthright citizenship somewhere else, you had to disavow your country and give up your passport. That's not true anymore. Now you can hold a security clearance with citizenship in more than one country. So I think it's changing. You could speak probably more specifically to it.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on top of that, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, having U.S. citizenship is generally like a prerequisite for getting a security clearance, which you have to have for a large number of jobs in the national security kind of space. Not generally, not at state. Yeah,
No, I don't
is
think
my
you do.
understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're Iranian, North Korean, or Russian, you might, but. Be a challenge with the current geopolitics. I would encourage you to think about adjacent to government roles. Like a lot of the think tanks, that citizenship won't be an issue, and you get to work on specific issues that impact U.S. foreign policy, for example. I do think most federal jobs you have to be a U.S. citizen, though.
Yeah, and I think that's a great advice also, especially a Farsi language skill. I think a number of these think tank type places would be highly interested in this also.
Yeah.
Good. Other questions? So first of all, I just really enjoyed this discussion with both of you. This is really an honor to have them in town. We'll hang around for a couple minutes if you want to come up and ask some other additional questions. Thank you for giving us all the advice and talking about your backgrounds. Also, I also encourage you to really consider, if you're interested in the ACAP program, you need to send me your name, your major, your minor. Send me a sentence or a couple sentences of areas of interest, skills, language skills, background. We're hoping to get this thing up and running by spring semester. So I know some of you have already enrolled in courses for spring. Deadlines haven't been set yet, so that's our goal. Again, send me an email. You have my email, Stephen.Lobel at Poly, it's a dash, not underscore, dash sci.utah.edu. My office is on the second floor right here also, so you can swing by also. Let me know if you're interested. And we're looking for about 10, maybe up to 20 students for this research experience, this ACAP Scholars Research Experience. Thank you for coming. We'll hang around for a couple of minutes if you have some more additional questions. Oh, and we need to get a picture.
All right, how do you want the picture? Do we want students to come up with you all, or turn around?
We can ask Greg.
Oh, I know.
What works for you? This is fine. This back there is fine.
Sounds good. So everybody just hold their spots. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And part 1. Okay, thanks. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
This is fun. Thank you so much.
Okay, so, as you mentioned, the State Department went over to paid. That's where my internship got voided.
Yeah.
Reinstated, applied the second time. Things didn't work out so well. I answered one question wrong about how long I could stay in DC. However, my question is, what does the process look like once you've got your interview? Because I understand that, like, first you go through first and second rounds of consideration, right? And then after that, you get an interview.
Yeah.
How does that look like, and what comes after?
It's been a while since I was intern. I've been involved in like interviewing or like kind of the first and second rounds.
Okay.
Recently, my guess is that you get an offer after those interviews. My guess is that you will interview with a couple different bureaus or offices.
I had mentioned two specific ones that I wanted to go to. Both were very international relations focused. I can't remember the exact ones, but I also wrote in my letter why my background matters and what I want to do with, just like you had said, what I want to do with the whole experience and how I plan to